These journals contain stunning images of the construction of the Titanic and its near-identical twin, the Olympic. I found these journals at the University of Illinois Library. The journals, written between 1909 and 1911, take me back to a time before the Titanic sunk. They give me a new perspective and let me appreciate the enormity of the scale of the engineering of the Olympic-class ships. So, let me share with you some fascinating details about the Titanic and its twins, the Olympic and Britannic. The story starts here in the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, Ireland. This large framework, called a gantry, surrounds the ships as they are built. It supports the overhead cranes and scaffolding used by workers as they construct the Olympic and the Titanic. Notice that just beyond the far end of the gantry lies the Belfast harbor. Workers will build the Olympic here on the right, and then 9 months later, before the Olympic is finished, they will start on the left the Titanic. When completed, the Olympic stern, or rear end of the ship, will point toward the harbor. The ship's construction starts with its keel, seen here as a long, dark shape. The keel is the backbone of the ship and gives the ship rigidity. If we look at the keel from the land side, we see the keel blocks that support it. These wooden blocks, typically pine, separate the ship from the slip, the concrete floor of the gantry. Each keel block stands about 5 feet high, so this creates a space under the ship for workers to construct the ship. Workers build the ship outward from the keel. Here they construct the Olympic's double bottom. In pink, we see the framework that separates and supports the two bottoms of the ship. The second bottom is shown in orange. It's made of steel plates and is sometimes called the tank top because the double bottom contains 44 watertight tanks. Most of the tanks carried seawater used as ballast to balance and add weight to the ship, but some carried fresh water. In total, the double bottom carried over 5,000 tons of water, or about 1.5 million gallons. Once they finish the double bottom, workers erect the framing for the hull. From this view, we see the framing for the stern of the ship. It's what a worker would see standing on the tank top from the fore and looking toward the aft of the ship. That's where the harbor is. Looking closer, we see the rib-like structure on the start of the transverse frame of the ship. Workers rivet to this frame the hull, which will form the skin. So far, we've watched the Olympic's construction. In the gantry, that ship sits here in the background. In the foreground lies the keel of its twin, the Titanic. Its construction began 9 months after the Olympic. We see here, attached to the keel, the framework of the Titanic's double bottom. Notice this large, claw-like mechanism lying on the ground, and these three hung from the cranes. These are hydraulic riveters, which workers used to install most of the 3 million rivets on the Titanic. Here we see the almost complete hulls of both the Olympic and Titanic. Work inside the Olympic progresses rapidly. The staterooms are being erected, and plumbing is being fitted throughout the ship. To prepare for the Olympic's launch, workers paint the ship a light gray so it will stand out in black and white photographs, although they repainted the ship black soon after its launch so that it matched previous White Star liners. To ease the slide into the water, the slip was greased with 23 tons of tallow, oil, and soap. And then the order to release the ship was given, the hydraulic triggers were released, and the ship slid into the harbor, reaching a speed of 12.5 knots. Notice that the ship is launched backwards. There are many reasons for this, but among them is at the stern. The rear is wider than the bow, so it is more buoyant. In a mere 62 seconds after launch, the Olympic was afloat. The moment the ship hit the water is its official launch date, although it was mostly empty. Here it weighs only about 27,000 tons and so rides high in the water. The draft, the vertical distance between the bottom of the ship and the surface of the water, is only 18 feet. After it is completely fitted, it will weigh nearly twice that, 52,000 tons. With that additional weight, the Olympic will drop until the water reaches the border painted on the hull, a draft of about 34 feet. The Olympic cannot move by itself, and so a tugboat tows it to the fitting out quay where a gigantic crane loads the ship. Here the crane lifts aboard a cylindrical boiler. The final fitting, including attaching the propellers, is done in dry dock. And then, once everything is in place, the Olympic is ready for the sea. 7 months after this launch, the Titanic was launched. I have from this journal a few photos of that event, but keep in mind the Olympic got the big press because it was first. The Titanic only becomes of more interest in retrospect. This photograph shows the twins, the Olympic and Titanic. Although built side by side, this was the last time they were photographed together. Less than a year after the launch of these two giant ships, one suffered a collision